She walked in with nothing and left the room speechless. Welcome to Tales by Orion. Let's uncover what really happened. The polished mahogany table in the boardroom of Sterling Valerius Industries reflected the stern, impassive faces of the executive committee like a dark, still lake. The air, as always in this rarefied atmosphere, was thick with the scent of expensive leather, imported coffee, and unspoken, high-stakes tension. At the head of the table sat Alastair Sterling, CEO, a man whose presence filled the room even in his silence. His silver-streaked hair was impeccably styled, his bespoke suit a testament to understated power, his eyes the color of a winter sky, missing nothing, conceding less. He was a man accustomed to control, to a world that bent to his will, a world where numbers were the only language that mattered, and emotions were a liability to be ruthlessly suppressed. Today, however, a subtle, almost imperceptible crack had appeared in his icy composure. The quarterly reports were a disaster. A key international merger, a deal that had consumed months of his time and vast company resources, was on the verge of collapse. The problem, as his team of highly paid analysts had so drily concluded, was a fundamental cultural disconnect, a failure to establish resonant communication channels with their prospective German partners, a company known for its old-world values, its deep-seated distrust of outsiders, and its almost spiritual commitment to long-term, relationship-based partnerships. In short, Sterling Valerius, with its aggressive, data-driven, American-style corporate culture, had failed to speak their language. And the cost of that failure was about to be catastrophic. As Alastair Sterling listened to his vice president of international operations, a man named Henderson, deliver a droning, jargon-filled presentation on mitigation strategies and revised engagement protocols, his gaze drifted for a fleeting, almost unconscious moment to the vast, panoramic window that overlooked the sprawling city below. He saw the ant-like scurry of humanity, the relentless, impersonal hum of commerce, and he felt nothing, just a cold, weary, and increasingly familiar sense of emptiness. His empire, built on a foundation of ruthless efficiency and unshakable control, felt hollow. He was a king presiding over a kingdom of numbers, a ruler of a realm devoid of something. He wasn't sure what, but he felt its absence like a phantom limb, a dull, persistent ache in the very core of his being. His attention was drawn back to the boardroom by a subtle, almost imperceptible sound from the far end of the room, near the discreet service entrance. A quiet, rhythmic hum, the sound of a floor polisher being wielded with a practiced, almost meditative efficiency. He glanced over, his eyes, accustomed to dismissing the unseen, the unimportant, momentarily snagging on the figure of the cleaner. She was a woman in her late 40s, perhaps, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, functional bun, her movements economical, her presence so unobtrusive she was practically invisible. He had seen her before, of course, a fleeting, anonymous figure in the polished corridors of his corporate headquarters. He didn't know her name. He didn't need to. She was a function, a part of the seamless, silent machinery that maintained the illusion of perfection in his carefully ordered world. But today, for some reason, his gaze lingered. He saw the quiet dignity in her posture, the meticulous attention to detail in her work, the faint, almost imperceptible weariness in the stoop of her shoulders. He saw a life, a story, a universe of experience that was utterly, profoundly alien to his own. The cleaner, a woman named Elena Vance, was, in fact, the mother of a young, brilliant engineering student named Clara, a girl whose future, Elena knew, depended on the meager earnings she eked out from this grueling, anonymous job. Elena, a woman of quiet intelligence and profound, unshakable resilience, had once harbored dreams of her own, dreams of becoming a teacher, a nurturer of young minds. But life, with its cruel, indifferent twists, had forced her to trade those dreams for a cleaning card, her intellectual aspirations for the practical realities of survival. She moved through the gilded cage of Sterling Valerius, a ghost in a gray uniform, her true self hidden, her spirit, though battered, unbroken. As Alastair Sterling watched the cleaner, a strange, almost surreal, thought entered his mind. Here he was surrounded by the best and brightest minds in the business world, men and women with Ivy League degrees and six-figure salaries, all struggling and failing to bridge a cultural disconnect with their German counterparts. And here was this woman, this invisible, silent worker, a part of the very fabric of his building, whose own story, whose own culture, whose own profound, unspoken truths remained utterly, completely unknown to him. The irony was as stark, as chilling, as the winter sky outside his window. The solution to his multi-billion-dollar problem, he was beginning to suspect, might not lie in the spreadsheets, the market analyses, the aggressive negotiating tactics of his high-power executives. It might lie, instead, in something far simpler, far more profound, far more human. It might lie in the quiet wisdom of the unseen, the unheard, the underestimated. The hum of the floor polisher seemed to grow louder, a steady, rhythmic counterpoint to the droning, meaningless jargon of his vice president. And Alastair Sterling, for the first time in a very long time, found himself truly, deeply listening. Not to the reports, not to the projections, but to the quiet, insistent, and profoundly unsettling hum of his own, long-dormant conscience. The boardroom meeting, a masterclass in high-level corporate despair, continued its droning, unproductive course. Vice President Henderson, a man whose confidence was directly proportional to the number of buzzwords he could cram into a single sentence, was now outlining a new, even more aggressive, synergistic outreach paradigm, a strategy that, Alastair knew, would be met with the same icy, disdainful silence from their German counterparts as all the previous attempts. The other executives nodded sagely, their faces carefully arranged in masks of thoughtful consideration, though their eyes held the glazed, vacant look of men and women who were simply waiting for the inevitable, disastrous end. Alastair's attention, however, remained fixed on the quiet drama unfolding at the far end of the room. The cleaner, Elena, had finished polishing the floor and was now meticulously dusting the antique credenza that lined the back wall, her movements still graceful, efficient, and utterly, profoundly invisible to everyone in the room except him. Then it happened. A discreet, almost imperceptible vibration from the pocket of Elena's gray tunic. Her mobile phone. She froze for a fraction of a second. A flicker of something? Alarm? Anxiety? Crossing her usually impassive face. She glanced quickly, almost furtively, at the boardroom table, at the powerful, oblivious men engrossed in their own self-important deliberations. Then, with a practiced, almost seamless discretion, she slipped out of the boardroom and into the adjoining service corridor, her hand already reaching into her pocket. Alastair, his curiosity now a powerful, undeniable force, found himself, to his own profound astonishment, rising from his seat. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he murmured, his voice a low, dismissive rumble that cut through Henderson's droning presentation. "I require a moment." He walked, not towards the main exit, but towards the same service corridor the cleaner had just disappeared into, his movements so uncharacteristic, so utterly unexpected, that they left the entire executive committee momentarily speechless, their mouths agape, their carefully constructed paradigms momentarily forgotten. He found Elena in the dim, narrow corridor, her back to him, her shoulders hunched, her voice a low, urgent murmur, speaking not in the polite, deferential English of the Sterling Valerius Corporation, but in a torrent of rapid, emotional, and unmistakably German. Alastair froze, his hand still on the doorknob, his mind reeling. German, the very language that had become the insurmountable barrier to his multi-billion-dollar merger, spoken with a flawless native fluency by his cleaner. He listened, shamelessly, as Elena's conversation unfolded, her voice a mixture of love, anxiety, and a profound, weary sadness. She was speaking to her daughter, Clara, a student, it seemed, at a prestigious engineering university in Berlin. She spoke of her pride in her daughter's achievements, of her fears for her future, of the constant, gnawing worry about tuition fees, about living expenses, about the immense, almost insurmountable, financial burden she was carrying on her own tired shoulders. She spoke of her own loneliness, of her longing for her homeland, for the familiar sights and sounds of a life she had been forced to leave behind. And she spoke of her job, of the long hours, of the aching muscles, of the quiet, often soul-crushing indignity of being invisible, of being overlooked, of being a cleaner. It was a raw, unvarnished, and utterly heartbreaking glimpse into a life of quiet sacrifice, of unwavering resilience, of a profound, unconditional love that transcended borders, that defied all obstacles. When Elena finally ended the call, her sigh was a sound of such profound, weary resignation that it seemed to physically pain Alistair to hear it. She turned, her eyes red-rimmed, her face etched with a sorrow that was usually so carefully concealed, and she saw him. Alistair Sterling, her boss, the CEO, standing in the dim, narrow corridor, his face a mask of something. Not anger, not displeasure, but something she couldn't quite decipher. Something that looked almost like shame. Elena's face went white. She thought she was going to be fired. For taking a personal call. For speaking her native tongue. For revealing, however briefly, the messy, inconvenient, human reality that lay beneath her gray, anonymous uniform. Mr. Sterling, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, I apologize. It was an emergency. My daughter... But Alistair Sterling raised a hand, a quiet, almost gentle, gesture that silenced her more effectively than any shout. His eyes, those usually icy, impenetrable pools, now held a new, unfamiliar, and deeply unsettling vulnerability. Elena, he began, his voice surprisingly soft, his use of her first name a stark, almost shocking, departure from their usual, impersonal dynamic. Your daughter, she is in Berlin? Elena nodded, her throat tight, her mind bracing for the inevitable reprimand. Yes, sir, at the Technical University. And she is, well... Alistair pressed, his gaze unwavering. She is brilliant, sir, Elena replied, a flicker of maternal pride momentarily eclipsing her fear. But the cost, it is a great struggle. Alistair was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on her, but his mind was miles away, in a sterile boardroom in Berlin, where his own team of highly paid negotiators were failing, repeatedly, to connect with their German counterparts, to understand their culture, to speak their language, to bridge the fundamental cultural disconnect that was costing his company billions. And here, standing before him, was a woman who embodied that culture, who spoke that language with a native fluency, who understood, on a profound, almost cellular level, the very values, the very sensibilities that his own organization had so spectacularly failed to grasp. The irony was so profound, so devastatingly, perfectly symmetrical, that he almost laughed. He had been searching for a key, a translator, a bridge to his German counterparts, and she had been here, all along, polishing the floors, dusting the furniture, moving silently, invisibly, through the very heart of his empire. Elena, Alistair said finally, his voice imbued with a new, almost chilling, authority, an authority that was no longer directed at her, but the profound, systemic blindness of his own organization, of his own leadership. I believe you, and I have a great deal to discuss. Not here, in my office. Now, he turned and walked back towards the boardroom, leaving Elena standing in the dim corridor, her heart pounding, her mind reeling a profound, almost terrifying sense of an impending, seismic shift in her own, and perhaps even his universe. The quiet cleaner had just been summoned, and the boardroom, though it didn't know it yet, was about to be profoundly, irrevocably changed. The executive committee of Sterling Valerius Industries stared in stunned, bewildered silence as Alistair Sterling re-entered the boardroom, followed, a few moments later, by the cleaner, Elena Vance. The air in the room, already thick with the tension of a failing merger, now crackled with a new, almost surreal, sense of confusion and disbelief. What on earth was the cleaner doing in the boardroom? Was this some sort of bizarre, unprecedented breach of protocol? Had she been summoned for some minor infraction, to be publicly reprimanded, to be made an example of? Vice President Henderson, his droning presentation on synergistic outreach paradigms cut short, looked particularly aggrieved, his face a mask of indignant confusion. Alastair Sterling, however, ignored their astonished gazes, their unspoken questions. He walked to the head of the long, mahogany table, his movements imbued with a new, almost chilling sense of purpose. He gestured for Elena to stand beside him, a gesture of such unexpected, almost shocking, inclusion that it sent a fresh ripple of consternation through the assembled executives. Elena, her own face pale with a mixture of fear and a dawning, incredulous hope, stood stiffly by his side, her hands clasped tightly before her, a small, unassuming figure in her gray uniform, suddenly thrust into the blinding, intimidating spotlight of corporate power. "Gentlemen," Alastair began, his voice quiet, but carrying a new, almost dangerous, resonance that commanded their absolute, unwavering attention. "I've just had a most illuminating conversation, one that has shed a rather unflattering light on our collective incompetence." A collective gasp went through the room. Henderson's face darkened. "Sir," he began, his voice a mixture of confusion and a dawning, defensive anger. "I don't understand." "Precisely, Henderson." Alastair snapped, his voice sharp, cutting. "You don't understand. None of you do. For weeks, we have been grappling with this German merger, this fundamental cultural disconnect, as you so eloquently put it in your reports. We have sent our best negotiators, our sharpest legal minds, our most aggressive strategists. And we have failed, utterly, abysmally. We have failed because we have been speaking the wrong language. Not just literally, but metaphorically. We have failed to understand their values, their priorities, their very way of being." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his stunned, and now deeply uncomfortable, executive team. "We have been trying to force a square peg into a round hole, to impose our own aggressive, data-driven, short-term profit-oriented culture onto a company, a people, a tradition that values patience, that values relationships, that values integrity." He then turned his gaze to Elena, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. And all this time, he continued, his voice now imbued with a quiet, almost devastating irony. "The key to this entire multi-billion-dollar puzzle, the very embodiment of the culture we have so spectacularly failed to understand, has been right here among us. Polishing our floors, dusting our furniture, moving silently, invisibly, through the very heart of our own, profoundly and unforgivably ignorant empire." He gestured towards Elena. "Gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to Elena Vance, or as I believe she should now be known, our new senior consultant for European cultural integration." The pronouncement landed with the force of a physical blow. The executives stared, their jaws slack, their eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief, horror, and a dawning, reluctant awe. Henderson looked as though he might spontaneously combust. The cleaner, sir," he stammered, his voice incredulous. You are promoting the cleaner to a senior consultant position?" "I am not promoting the cleaner, Henderson," Alastair replied, his voice cold as ice. "I am recognizing talent. I am acknowledging wisdom. I am leveraging an asset that has been, until now, so criminally, so stupidly overlooked. Elena Vance, gentlemen, is more than just a cleaner. She is a woman of profound intelligence, of deep cultural understanding, of a quiet, unwavering integrity that seems to be in rather short supply in this room." He then turned to Elena, his gaze direct, unwavering. "Elena," he said, his voice now gentle, almost a plea, "I need your help. We need your help. We need you to teach us, to guide us, to help us bridge this chasm of misunderstanding that our own arrogance, our own ignorance has created." He paused, then added, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying to every corner of the silent, astonished room. "We need you to speak for us, Elena, in your own language, in your own voice, in a way that they will finally, truly understand." Elena looked at him, at the powerful, formidable CEO, the man who had, just moments before, represented everything that was oppressive, everything that was dismissive in her life. And she saw in his eyes not just a desperate need for a business solution, but something more, something deeper, a flicker of genuine humility, of profound, wrenching regret, of a dawning, almost painful humanity. She thought of her daughter, Clara, of her future, of the immense, crushing weight of her financial struggles. She thought of her own long-suppressed dreams, of her intellect, her knowledge, so long left to languish in the shadows. And she thought of this strange, improbable, and utterly terrifying opportunity that had just been laid at her feet. It was a chance to change everything. For her daughter, for her family, for herself. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," Elena Vance said finally, her voice quiet, but firm, her gaze meeting his anew, almost regal, dignity radiating from her. I believe I can help you. I believe I can teach you to listen, and perhaps, just perhaps, to finally, truly understand." The janitor's daughter, in a manner of speaking, had not just entered the boardroom. She had, in a quiet, profound, and utterly transformative way, taken it over. The future of Sterling Valerius Industries, and of Alistair Sterling himself, had just been placed in the most unexpected and most capable of hands. The appointment of Elena Vance as Sterling Valerius's senior consultant for European cultural integration was, to put it mildly, a seismic event within the corporation. It was a move so unorthodox, so utterly defiant of corporate protocol, that it sent shockwaves through every department, from the mailroom to the executive suite. The initial reaction among the senior management was one of thinly veiled contempt, of resentful disbelief. Henderson, the flustered vice president, and his coterie of equally arrogant executives saw it as an affront, a personal humiliation, a sign that their formidable CO had finally, irrevocably, lost his mind. They whispered in the hushed corridors, plotted in their opulent offices, their conversations a toxic brew of condescension, of racial and class-based prejudice, of a deep-seated, terrified resistance to this sudden, inexplicable appending of their carefully ordered world. The cleaner? A consultant? They would sneer, their voices dripping with a venomous disdain. What could she possibly teach us? How to properly buff a marble floor? How to achieve a streak-free shine on a boardroom window? They did not see the quiet intelligence in Elena's eyes, the profound, intuitive understanding of human nature that lay behind her unassuming demeanor. They saw only the gray uniform, the calloused hands, the quiet, almost invisible woman who had, for so long, been a mere fixture in their periphery, a silent, unacknowledged servant to their power. Alistair Sterling, however, was resolute. He had seen something in Elena, something profound, something authentic, something that his own world of spreadsheets and power plays had systematically, tragically extinguished. He saw in her not a cleaner, but a key, a bridge, a quiet, powerful testament to the very values he had so spectacularly failed to understand and so desperately needed to embrace. He ignored the whispers, the veiled insubordination, the palpable resentment of his executive team. He provided Elena with an office, a spacious, sunlit room that had once belonged to a now disgraced senior vice president. He gave her a budget, a team of young, bright, and crucially open-minded researchers, and a single, clear mandate. Teach us, Elena. Show us the way. Elena, for her part, approached her new role with the same quiet dignity, the same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized her work as a cleaner. She did not try to mimic the aggressive, jargon-filled language of her new colleagues. She did not engage in their petty power plays, their cynical manipulations. Instead, she listened. She observed. She absorbed. She spent hours in the company archives, poring over the history of their prospective German partners, understanding not just their business model, but their cultural DNA, their deeply held values of craftsmanship, of loyalty, of a multi-generational commitment to quality over short-term profit. She spoke at length with Alistair, not about corporate strategy, but about human connection, about the importance of respect, of genuine, heartfelt communication, of building relationships based on trust, not just on transactional advantage. She began to subtly, quietly re-educate him, to reawaken a part of him that had been dormant for decades, the part that understood the profound, often unspoken, language of the human heart. She then, with Alistair's full, unwavering support, began to implement her strategy. It was a strategy that was as unorthodox as it was brilliant. She advised Alistair to halt all formal negotiations with the German company, to cease the relentless barrage of aggressive proposals, of data-driven presentations, of empty, corporate-speak apologies. Instead, she suggested a different approach, a quieter approach, an approach based on respect. She drafted a letter, not a formal business communication, but a personal, heartfelt apology from Alistair Sterling himself, a letter written in flawless, nuanced German, a language Elena, it turned out, spoke with a quiet, academic fluency, another of her many hidden talents. The letter did not speak of profit margins or synergistic paradigms. It spoke of regret, of a dawning understanding, of a genuine desire to learn, to listen, to bridge the cultural chasm that had separated them. It spoke of a profound respect for their traditions, for their values, for their unique and deeply admirable way of doing business. It was a letter that was not a negotiation, but an invitation to a new kind of conversation, a conversation based not on power, but on partnership. Alistair Sterling, reading the letter Elena had so eloquently, so powerfully drafted, felt a profound, almost painful sense of humility and a dawning, overwhelming respect for the woman who stood before him. She was not just a consultant. She was a teacher, a mentor, a quiet, powerful force for a change he so desperately, so profoundly needed. He signed the letter, his own hand, for the first time in years, feeling not like the hand of a conqueror, but like the hand of a student, a humble supplicant seeking a deeper, more meaningful wisdom. The letter was sent, a quiet, unassuming missive carrying the weight of a multi-billion-dollar empire and the fragile, burgeoning hope of its profound and entirely unexpected redemption. The response, when it came, was not a formal communication from the German company's legal department. It was a single, handwritten note on heavy, cream-colored cardstock from the company's elderly, reclusive, and notoriously intractable patriarch himself. It was addressed not to Alistair Sterling, CEO, but to Frau Elena Vance, senior consultant. And it contained a single, simple, and utterly transformative sentence, Frau Vance. It read, in elegant, flowing German script, "I believe for the first time that we may have found a common language. I would be honored to begin a conversation." The janitor's daughter, the quiet cleaner, had not just opened a door. She had, with her quiet wisdom, her profound integrity, her unwavering belief in the power of human connection, begun to build a bridge that would not just save a merger, but would perhaps, just perhaps, save the very soul of Sterling Valerius Industries and of the man who led it. The invitation from the patriarch of the German company, addressed personally to Elena Vance, sent a fresh wave of shock and grudging respect through the executive suites of Sterling Valerius. The quiet cleaner, the woman they had so contemptuously dismissed, had achieved in a single, eloquent letter what their entire, high-powered team had failed to accomplish in months of aggressive, expensive, and ultimately fruitless negotiation. She had, as the old German patriarch had so astutely observed, found a common language. Alistair Sterling, his initial surprise giving way to a profound, almost overwhelming sense of vindication, insisted that Elena lead the delegation to Germany. The idea was met with sputtering, indignant protests from Henderson and his cronies. A cleaner, leading a multi-billion-dollar negotiation? It was unthinkable, unprecedented, an affront to the very foundations of corporate hierarchy. But Alastair was immovable. Elena Vance, he had stated, his voice a cold, quiet blade that silenced all dissent, is the only person in this organization who has demonstrated a genuine understanding of the people we are dealing with. She is not just our consultant. She is our ambassador. She will lead. You will follow. And you will, for once in your overpaid, underperforming lives, listen. Is that understood? It was. The delegation that flew to Germany was unlike any that Sterling Valerius had ever dispatched. It was led not by a slick, aggressive negotiator, but by a quiet, unassuming woman in a simple, elegant business suit, a suit Alastair had personally and discreetly arranged for, ensuring it was of the finest quality, a silent, respectful acknowledgement of her new, elevated status. Elena moved through the formal, old-world corridors of the German company's headquarters with a quiet, confident grace, her very presence a testament to a different kind of power, a power rooted not in arrogance, but in empathy, in respect, in a profound, intuitive understanding of the unspoken currents that shaped human interaction. The negotiations, when they began, were not negotiations at all. They were conversations. Elena spoke little, allowing the elderly German patriarch to lead, to share his stories, his values, his vision for his company, a company that was not just a business, but a family, a legacy, a living testament to generations of craftsmanship and integrity. She listened, not with the predatory focus of a negotiator seeking to exploit a weakness, but with the genuine, empathetic interest of a scholar, a student, a fellow human being seeking to understand. She spoke of her own life, of her own values, of the quiet dignity of hard work, of the profound, enduring power of family, of community, of a shared commitment to quality, to excellence, to leaving the world a slightly better place than one found it. She spoke, in short, his language, a language of the heart. The German patriarch, a man known for his shrewdness, his deep-seated distrust of outsiders, his almost legendary resistance to the modern, soulless world of global finance, found himself charmed, disarmed, profoundly, deeply moved. He saw in Elena not a corporate functionary, not a tool of a rapacious, foreign conglomerate, but a kindred spirit, a woman of profound wisdom, of quiet strength, of an unshakable, old-world integrity that resonated with his own. The merger, when it was finally, inevitably agreed upon, was not a takeover, but a true partnership, a joining of forces based on mutual respect, on shared values, on a common vision for a future that was not just profitable, but meaningful. The news of the successful merger sent a ripple of astonishment through the global financial community. Sterling Valerius, the aggressive, data-driven giant, had somehow managed to win over the unwinnable, to forge an alliance with the unallianceable. The industry analysts were baffled. They spoke of brilliant new strategies, of unforeseen market synergies, of a masterful, albeit mysterious, new negotiating paradigm. They did not, of course, speak of Elena Vance. Her role, her contribution, her quiet, transformative genius remained a closely guarded secret within the highest echelons of Sterling Valerius, a testament to the quiet, often invisible, power of the underestimated, the overlooked, the unheard. Alastair Sterling, upon Elena's triumphant return, summoned her to his office. He stood by his vast panoramic window, gazing out at the sprawling city below, his expression unreadable. Elena stood before him, her heart pounding, a mixture of exhaustion, exhilaration, and a quiet, profound sense of accomplishment stirring within her. "Elena," Alastair said finally, turning to face her, his voice low, resonant, imbued with an emotion she had never heard from him before. "You have not just saved a merger. You have not just earned your rather considerable bonus." He paused, his gaze, those usually icy, impenetrable pools, now holding a new, almost raw, vulnerability. "You have saved me, Elena, from myself, from the cold, empty, and ultimately meaningless world I had built around me. You have reminded me of what truly matters, of integrity, of empathy, of humanity. He walked towards her, his movements no longer those of a powerful CEO addressing a subordinate, but of a man, a humble, grateful man, acknowledging a profound, life-altering debt. He reached out, not to shake her hand, but to gently, respectfully, take it in his own. "The Alera Foundation," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "The foundation I established in my lost daughter's name has for too long been a hollow shell, a monument to my grief, my cynicism. I want you to run it, Elena, not as a consultant, but as its director, its heart, its soul. I want you to reshape it, to infuse it with your wisdom, your compassion, your unwavering belief in the power of human connection. I want you to make it a true beacon of hope, a legacy worthy of them both. Of Alera, and of you." Elena stared at him, tears welling in her own eyes, a wave of profound, overwhelming emotion washing over her. Director of the Alera Foundation. It was a role so far beyond anything she had ever dared to imagine, a responsibility so profound, so meaningful, that it stole her breath. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered, her voice trembling, I don't know what to say." "Say yes, Elena," Alistair Sterling replied, his own voice now a ragged whisper, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "Say yes, and help me learn how to be a good man again." And in that moment, in that vast, opulent office high above the indifferent city, two solitary souls, a billionaire and a cleaner, a grieving father and a devoted mother, a cynic and a believer, found in each other not just a solution to a corporate problem, but a profound, unexpected, and deeply, beautifully human redemption. The janitor's daughter had not just entered the boardroom. She had, with her quiet wisdom, her profound integrity, her unwavering belief in the power of the human heart, rebuilt it from the ground up, infusing it with a light, a warmth, a hope that would forever change the landscape of their lives and of the very world they inhabited. The transformation of the Alera Foundation under Elena Vance's leadership was nothing short of miraculous. It was no longer a sterile, corporate entity, a vehicle for tax write-offs and glossy public relations campaigns. It became a living, breathing testament to its namesake's spirit, a vibrant, compassionate force for good in a world that so often seemed to have forgotten the meaning of the word. Elena, as its new director, moved with a quiet, unwavering purpose, her profound understanding of human need, of systemic inequity, guiding her every decision. She stripped away the layers of bureaucracy, the cumbersome application processes, the impersonal, data-driven metrics of success. She instituted a new philosophy, a philosophy rooted in direct, human-to-human connection, in listening, in empathy, in providing not just financial assistance, but genuine, heartfelt support. The foundation began to fund small, grassroots initiatives that had been overlooked by larger, more conventional charities. Community gardens in food deserts, after-school arts programs for at-risk youth, mentorship programs for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds, microloan initiatives for aspiring female entrepreneurs in developing countries. Elena traveled the world, not as a corporate emissary, but as a listener, a learner, a humble, respectful ambassador of hope. She met with the people the foundation sought to serve, heard their stories, understood their struggles, and worked with them, as partners, to create sustainable, meaningful change. Alistair Sterling, for his part, became Elena's staunchest ally, her most enthusiastic supporter. He provided the resources, the influence, the global network, but he deferred, always, to her wisdom, her intuition, her profound, unwavering moral compass. He accompanied her on many of her trips, shedding his bespoke suits for simple, practical clothes, his role not that of a powerful CEO, but of a quiet, observant student, learning from her example. The true meaning of philanthropy, of service, of a life lived in the pursuit of something greater than mere personal gain. The change in him was profound, undeniable. The icy, remote Arctic fox was gone, replaced by a man of quiet warmth, of surprising humor, of a deep, almost spiritual contentment. The hollowness in his eyes was filled with a new, gentle light, the light of a man who had, finally, found his way home. The corporate world watched in bewildered astonishment as Sterling Valerius Industries, under Alastair's subtly transformed leadership, began to evolve. The relentless pursuit of profit was now tempered by a new, almost unheard of, commitment to corporate social responsibility, to ethical business practices, to the well-being of its employees and the communities in which it operated. The company's stock, paradoxically, soared. It seemed that integrity, that humanity, that a genuine commitment to the greater good was not just good for the soul. It was, in the long run, good for business. Henderson, the once arrogant vice president, and his coterie of cynical executives were either gradually, quietly replaced, or they underwent their own, reluctant, but ultimately genuine transformations, their bottom-line driven worldview slowly, surely, being eroded by the undeniable success of Alastair's and Elena's new, more human-centric approach. The Alara Foundation became a global beacon of hope. Its innovative, compassionate model of philanthropy studied and emulated by organizations around the world. And Elena Vance, the quiet cleaner who had once been invisible, became one of its most respected, most beloved, and most influential voices. She never sought the spotlight, never courted fame. Her power always rooted in her quiet dignity, her profound humility, her unwavering commitment to serving others. Her daughter, Clara, graduated from the Technical University of Berlin with top honors, her future bright with a promise that had been purchased by her mother's quiet, relentless, and ultimately triumphant sacrifice. Clara, like her mother, was a woman of profound intelligence, of deep compassion, of a quiet, unwavering strength, and she eventually joined her mother at the Alara Foundation. The two of them working side by side, a powerful, compassionate force for good in a world that so desperately needed it. One cool autumn evening, years after their first fateful encounter in the Sterling Valerius Boardroom, Alastair and Elena stood on the terrace of a small community center in a remote, struggling corner of the world, a community center the Alara Foundation had helped to build. The air was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, with the scent of a simple, shared meal, with the quiet, vibrant hum of a community in the process of healing, of rebuilding, of finding its own collective hope. They stood together in the fading light, two solitary souls who had, through the strangest, most improbable of circumstances, found in each other a partner, a friend, a kindred spirit. They had, in their own unique and profoundly human ways, saved each other. "Do you ever miss it, Elena?" Alastair asked suddenly, his voice a low, resonant rumble, his gaze fixed on the distant, setting sun. "Miss what, Alastair?" Elena replied, her own voice calm, steady, a quiet smile playing on her lips. "The grandeur metropolitan," he said, a faint, almost wistful humor in his tone. "The polished floors, the demanding guests, the blissful anonymity." Elena was silent for a long moment, her dark, wise eyes reflecting the fiery colors of the sunset. "Sometimes," she admitted finally, her voice barely a whisper, "sometimes I miss the simplicity, the quiet, the illusion of a life where the most pressing concern was the perfect, streak-free shine on a boardroom window." She paused, then turned to look at him, her gaze direct, unwavering, filled with a profound, unspoken, and utterly mutual affection. "But I would not trade this, Alastair. This is a far more beautiful and far more meaningful shine." Alastair met her gaze, his own icy blue eyes, once so cold, now filled with a new, unfamiliar warmth, a deep, abiding, and profoundly human peace. "Nor I, Elena," he said softly. "Nor I." They stood together in the gathering dusk, two unlikely companions, their pasts a tapestry of shadows and secrets, their futures an unwritten, yet now deeply, beautifully, hopeful landscape. They had both been changed irrevocably by their encounter, by the dangerous, exhilarating, and ultimately redemptive journey they had shared. They were survivors. They were warriors. They were partners. And as the first stars began to prick the darkening velvet of the sky, Alastair Sterling and Elena Vance, the billionaire and the cleaner, the cynic and the believer, raised their imaginary glasses in a silent, solitary toast. To second chances, to quiet revolutions, to the enduring, indomitable, and often profoundly surprising power of the human spirit. And perhaps, just perhaps, to the faint, flickering, but never entirely extinguished hope that even in the darkest, most compromised of worlds, true and lasting change is always, always possible.